On a Saturday afternoon in 1911, on the 8th floor of a building in New York City, a fire started in a bin of fabric scraps. In less than 20 minutes, 146 people were dead. Most of them were girls, some as young as 14, and when their families finally learned how they died, one detail stopped the entire city cold. Doctoral break time 1.0's / the doors had been locked from the outside. Dectored break time Quoco 1.0's / this is the story of the fire they couldn't put out and the men who made sure no one could get out. The Triangle Waist Company sat on the top 3 floors of the Ash Building in the heart of Manhattan. It made shirtwaists the high-collared blouses every fashionable woman wore. Business was booming. Its owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, were known around the city as the Shirtwaist Kings. But the hands that built that empire belonged to someone else. Hundreds of young immigrant women, Italian and Jewish, many fresh off the boat, some who couldn't yet speak English. They worked 9 hours a day on weekdays, 7 on Saturdays, hunched over machines for a few dollars a week. And they worked behind locked doors. The owners had a reason. They were convinced the girls were stealing scraps of cloth. So at the end of each shift, the workers had to file out through a single door, one at a time, where a guard could check their bags. The other stairwell door, the one on the Washington Place side, was kept locked. It would cost them nothing to keep it that way. H break time -0, 7's / MILF. It would cost the workers everything. March 25th, 1911, a Saturday near the end of the shift. The workday was almost over. Coats were being gathered, and under a cutter's table on the 8th floor, in a wooden bin packed with months of cotton scraps, a fire began. No one is certain how most likely a stray match or cigarette, despite the rules against smoking. It didn't matter how it started. What mattered was what it found. Cotton burns fast. Tissue paper patterns hung from the ceilings like dry leaves. Fabric was stacked floor to ceiling. In seconds, the fire wasn't a spark in a bin. It was a wall. Here is the cruelest part of the geometry. There were 3 floors, and the warning reached them in a deadly order. The 8th floor, where the fire began, knew first. Many got out. A bookkeeper managed to phone up to the 10th floor where the owners and executives worked. They escaped across the roof to the building next door. But no one warned the 9th floor. U break time Secchio 1.5's / By the time the women on the 9th floor smelled smoke, the fire was already climbing the stairwell beneath them. They ran to the exits. One door opened to a stairwell already filling with flame. They turned and ran to the other door, the Washington Place door. They turned the handle. It didn't move. Doctoral break time source 0.7 / it was locked. Imagine it. A room full of people, the fire at your back, and the only way out is a door that will not open. They pounded on it. They piled against it. The bodies of those girls were later found stacked behind that door. There was a fire escape. A flimsy iron staircase bolted to the back of the building. Dozens climbed onto it, desperate, under their weight, and the heat it twisted, buckled, and tore away from the wall, sending the people on it falling to the courtyard below. The elevators made a few brave trips, packed beyond capacity, until the heat warped the rails and they stopped. Some climbed down the elevator cables by hand, some fell down the empty shaft, and outside, the fire department arrived within minutes. They were fast. They were brave. But when they raised their tallest ladders, the ladders stopped at the 6th floor. The trapped workers were on the 8th and 9th. The ladders reached 2 floors too short. What happened next was witnessed by hundreds of people on the street, and it is the part survivors could never forget. With the fire behind them and no way down, the workers went to the windows. More than 60 of them chose the only thing left to choose. Firefighters held up nets, but no net could catch a person falling from the 9th floor. One reporter on the street that day wrote that he learned a new sound, a sound he hoped never to hear again, the thud of a life again and again against the pavement. To break time, DECUO 1.5 / in less than 20 minutes it was over. 146 were dead, 123 of them women and girls. That night, the bodies were laid in a covered pier along the river so families could try to identify them. The line stretched for blocks, mothers searching for daughters who had left for work that morning, expecting them home for dinner. Many of the victims were so young and so newly arrived in America that they were barely known. 6 of them could not be identified at all. They were buried under a single stone marked unknown. It would take exactly 100 years until 2011 before a historian finally recovered their names. 6 people erased into anonymity who had to wait a century just to be called by who they were. So what happened to the men who locked the door? Max Blank and Isaac Harris were put on trial that December, charged with manslaughter. The case came down to a single question. Could the prosecution prove that the owners knew the Washington Place door was locked at that exact moment? It was an almost impossible thing to prove. After a short deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Hope break time, Ho 1.0s / not guilty. Both men walked free. 2 years later, the families won a civil suit. The compensation for each life lost was $75. And that same year, 1913, Max Blank was caught again, locking a factory door during working hours. The fine this time was $20. Hope break time, 0.8 / $20. 2 years after 146 people died behind a locked door, the punishment for locking another one was $20. But the story doesn't end in that courtroom, because one young woman named Frances Perkins watched the fire from the street that day. She never forgot it. She would go on to become the first female member of a United States cabinet and one of the architects of America's labor laws. The outrage over the Triangle fire forced New York to act. Investigators were sent into the factories, and within a few years, more than 30 new laws were written mandating unlocked exits, fire drills, sprinklers, and doors that open outward. Look at any public building you walk into today. The exit doors push open from the inside. They are never locked while people are within. That is not an accident. That rule is written in the memory of 146 people who could not get out. They were told they were stealing scraps of cloth, so they were locked in. And when the fire came, the lock held long enough to kill them and not long enough to convict anyone. History remembers the laws that followed. It almost forgot the girls who paid for them. Dr. Break Time, Swoke 1.0s / this is Cindergrave, the stories the past tried to bury and hoped you'd never read. If you want more of them, subscribe, because it was always darker than they taught you.